and welcome to A Good Walk Spoiled Adventures in Golf with your host, Scott Poniewaz, also known as Pony Golf. A Good Walk Spoiled is part of the Millions.co and Golfer Gang networks. Thank you for tuning in. Let's swing into this week's episode.
This September, golf's loudest week is about to land in New York. The Ryder Cup is coming to a municipal giant with a warning sign at the first tee, and that course is Bethpage Black. I'm Scott Poniewaz at at Pony_golf on Instagram, and today we are previewing the 2025 Ryder Cup and taking a deep dive into one of the world's most intimidating and beloved public golf course. So buckle up. Today's going to be a fun episode. I'm super excited, and I'm even wearing my Bethpage Black hat to wrap it all today. So let's dig in. Hey everyone, welcome back to A Good Walk Spoiled Adventures in Golf. I am going to be riding this one out solo today, and we've got a packed episode. We've got a great, at least up to the minute when I've recorded this, Ryder Cup preview that will take a look at the teams and what we can expect out of Bethpage Black and the US versus Europe battle that's about to take place here in just a couple weeks, and a walk through the history, architecture, and of course the travel experience of Bethpage Black, which is what makes A Good Walk Spoiled Adventures in Golf just that second part, the Adventures in Golf. One of the great things about Bethpage Black is it is actually a course that you can get out and play. It is definitely not the easiest to get a tee time on, being right outside of New York City. It is a challenge, but, it is one that you and the pros can tee it up from those back tees and have that same experience. So here's the sort of run of show or plan for today. We're going to kick it off with the captains and the culture, what Keegan Bradley and Luke Donald are going to bring to this 2025 Ryder Cup face-off. We're going to take a look at some of the form and the pairings. And, since we're recording this a few days here in advance, we're not going to necessarily have the precise ones, but it's going to be a little bit of an outlook, some of my personal takes, and then we're going to have a little bit more on Bethpage and the history, a little bit of Bethpage Black 101, a little bit of the history, design DNA, and take a look at some of those holes that can swing some of these matches, because there is definitely some courses that come down some of the holes coming down the home stretch that will definitely challenge players, including number 17, which is statistically considered one of the hardest holes in professional golf. And then we're going to just kind of touch on some of the fan guide, how to get there, where to post up, what to do along your ride. And then I'm going to kind of close it out with a little bit of my early predictions. So let's start with the leaders and who will set the tone for the week. So first, the captains. For the United States, it's going to be Mr. Keegan Bradley. And Keegan Bradley was named to this post in July 2024. And those that have been watching him play out his season have seen that he actually has been having a heck of a run. So just over the last several weeks of the PGA Tour season, he started to come into the picture as potentially one of the first playing and captaining people since Arnold Palmer. And he also happens to be the youngest U.S. captain since Arnold Palmer in 1963. And really, like, one of the days that started to really bring the 39-year-old Keegan Bradley up into the spotlight as potentially being a both player and coach. And so many people were arguing for him to be able to do this was because of his results, not only at the Travelers Championship, where he ended up being a actual winner back in June, but then also his number 7 finish at the Eastlake FedEx Cup playoff championships. And so with him, basically having such a great run this past season and a couple of victories and near victories, there were many that were actually arguing for Keegan Bradley to not only be the captain, but also sort of step into a player coach role. And, there was definitely a little drama around that, oh, well, he can't. But actually with so many assistant coaches nowadays, or captains, it actually could have happened. And I personally am a little bit bummed, and you can argue that, he should captain and just captain. But at 39 years old, this is probably one of the last chances, especially given that he's running pretty hot right now as a player. Probably one of the last chances that he'll have to be potentially that player coach role. And so he did end up taking one for the team with some other captain's choices. But, just being young, you are going to see some more contemporary, potentially more aggressive and a little bit edgier play coming out of the U.S. team. And he's also got the sort of chip on your shoulder, take the best shot energy that I think New York especially is going to love. Obviously, not everybody is coming from New York, but there will be a huge New York-based contingency in that fan base. So that's where the U.S. captain is sitting. It should be exciting to see some of the decisions that he makes as the weekend progresses for the Ryder Cup. For Europe, you've got Luke Donald returning after steering a pretty much clinical win in Rome in 2023. Luke's leadership style is pretty precise, calm, and prepared. So you're going to probably see a lot of similar continuity in the process from the 2023 Rome event. He focuses a lot on that data-driven decision-making, a lot of detailed course prep for the team, and then also just a clear plan for managing the noise, which when you were in Rome and the Europeans' backyard in 2023, you're going to have a lot more favorable crowds for Team Europe. However, as we step into the New York state of mind at Bethpage Black, it's going to definitely be rowdier for the U.S. So having a captain that is going to be able to help the team manage that and also just manage the pairings in a way that helps to keep that tension hopefully lower for them will be a big driver for that team. Obviously, the United States captain Keegan Bradley will get a lot more say in the layout of the course, favoring some of the U.S. players versus some of the European playing styles. So he does have a little bit of that in his back pocket as the U.S. captain. Culturally, however, this is going to be a quite fascinating clash. U.S., as I just mentioned, they've got that home crowd, and we've really seen it in recent events, both for the Ryder Cup as well as the Solheim Cup, which is the women's version of the Ryder Cup. And you really see that home crowd tilting the charts. And emotionally, we saw it back at Whistling Straits. That U.S. Wisconsin crowd was just getting so rowdy. You saw the players feeding off of it. Players like Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, that are just favorites in the backyard. And, they're rallying the crowds as well and getting out there and getting the U.S. crowds hyped. And I think that with this being potentially one of the bigger crowds that Bethpage Black ever sees, it's going to get loud. And I think, with that young energy of Keegan Bradley and just, that young crowd, the young team that the U.S. has as well, it's going to get rowdy. And I think Europe is able to counter with a lot of that composure, the chemistry, the deep belief in the pairings culture, and sort of the ebbs and flows that happens with that. So you're really going to end up seeing almost like a emotion versus execution battle out there. And it's really going to define the weekend. And so I think the US is going to be highly driven on that emotional side. And I think Europe is going to have to reach deep into their expertise and experience on execution, that data, that course, the design, how it's going to be playing, and how each player can really use it to their strategic advantage. So should be an exciting one. All right, so let's talk about who thrives on a course like Bethpage Black. And this course really on three things. I'd say command with the driver, starting lines and carry numbers are going to matter. High flight, high spin approach shots because the greens are elevated and also well defended. And then a tough short game to handle the tight surroundings and deep bunkers. The rough is going to be playing incredibly thick. So that short game around the green, you're going to be chipping out a deep rough. And, you see this at a lot of US Opens too. You saw it with the PGA Championship here at Bethpage Black. That rough is going to be thick. And so command with the driver, like I said, starting lines and carry numbers, getting the ball in the fairway is also going to be key, but also getting it out there. Bethpage Black is an incredibly long course. And, depending on the day where they move tees up or back, could also favor specific players. And so on the US side, thinking about the headliners with those elite tee to green games and enough pop to turn par fours into wedges, you're going to look at players like Scotty Scheffler and Xander Schauffele who bring that control off the tee. Also, some of those long hitters like Bryson DeChambeau, who's going to be able to really bomb the ball out there. And he's got a lot of that swing speed that can fight a ball out of deep rough, as we've seen with other US Opens, as an example, Winged Foot, where he really thrived with getting the ball out there and being able to get it out of thick rough. Meanwhile, you've got other players that can bring incredible precision to the greens. And so people like Colin Morikawa, some of the best irons in the game and best, approach shot statistically in the game. You've got Wyndham Clark's speed, which can open up some lines. And so if he really wants to, lean into the home field with some of those alternate shot kind of pairings, getting some bombers or some laser iron players with a confident putter can really be a blueprint for success. On the European side, the spine is clear. That's going to be Rory McIlroy, who's been, for the most part, having a great year leading up into the Ryder Cup, but he also has had some sort of flailing moments. But he does bring that distance off the tee, strong approach shots, just great overall game, as well as that experience and leadership that the team is going to look to. John Rahm, he brings that, the Spaniard brings that all-around power, as well as that gamesmanship and intimidation factor. He just seems like a guy on the course that you don't want to be walking down the fairway in competition with in match play. And then you've got the nice guy on the other side of things, which is Victor Hovland, who's all-around great guy, but his short game has been improving significantly. Plus, he's just got that long, fearless driver off the tee. Add in some of the match play stalwarts and also a guy who's finally gotten his major out of, or his PGA Tour win out of the way, as well as that FedEx Cup, Tommy Fleetwood, who's just a great match player, Tyrrell Hatton, and you've got some flexibility. The bomb and gouge and four ball, precision and discipline and foursomes. So, you've really got some great opportunities. So as I kind of mentioned there, four ball and foursomes. So here's a little background on those and what they are, as well as some of the pairings philosophy. So four ball, also often known as best ball, basically let the big dogs eat. Green lights off the tees. especially holes like 4 and 13 that you'll want to keep an eye out, the only par 5s. And it really gives them the license to attack tucked pins. Meanwhile, you can have those big hitters that are going big off the tee, and the other player that's keeping the consistency to back up with, the standard birdie maybe, or giving that person, the other player, a look at eagle by going after it. Foursomes, on the other hand, alternate shot. So that is a little bit more of the balance profiles. So as I was mentioning before, somebody like a Bryson DeChambeau and a Colin Morikawa, where you have the driver of the ball with a long ball off the tee, and then the elite wedge player or irons into the green, along with confident putting. And so really can keep those egos aligned and keeps the ball in play, balancing those strengths and weaknesses between several players. And then one tiny but important detail: the first hole at Bethpage Black is not a handshake. Winning the very first hole will feel like a 2-point swing, and that's just because of the psychological jolt that this amphitheater of noise coming out of the clubhouse is going to give you. And just having that big boom, the roar of the crowds, especially on the US side, I think, with the home crowd, getting that first hole under your belt with a point, that's going to be a big win for those players. All right, and after that quick little intermission from our sponsors, thank you for them for supporting A Good Walk Spoiled. Again, if you're just joining in, my name is Scott Poniewaz. I am the host of A Good Walk Spoiled, Adventures in Golf, as well as at Pony_golf on Instagram. Follow along over there. You can always head over to the website as well, https://pony.golf, and you can find some of my sponsors, support them. There's some affiliate links, some of those being Holderness and Bourne. There are a couple others out there like Vessel, Galway Bay, Red Rooster Golf, all great brands that I love to work with. And then you can also pick up some different swag to rep the podcast, such as hoodies, hats, and t-shirts for A Good Walk Spoiled from millions.co. And you can also check out the video podcast versions over there, as well as on my YouTube. You can find this, depending on where you're watching, on different channels. So if you're more an audio person and are finding this on YouTube, you can also find it on Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe and like and leave great feedback for me on each of those. And if you're listening on the audio side of things, like I just mentioned, you can find the video version of the podcast, as well as some great clips and shorts and things like that on both millions.co as well as on YouTube. So subscribe and follow along on all of those different channels, and drop some likes, share me with others. If you have friends that aren't listening to this, take a listen over there. And of course, I do have to give a shout out to the Golfer Gang Network. The Golfer Gang Network is supporting me with a lot of the recording, as well as all the different sponsors that they help as well, aside from sort of my primary sort of sponsors. But if you have a podcast, are thinking about starting a podcast, and are looking for support in producing that, golfergang.com. Go check that out. And you can also find a bunch of the other great podcasts if you're looking for other great golf content over there. So with that all sort of interluded there, welcome back to the next segment in A Good Walk Spoiled, Adventures in Golf. We're going to dive into Bethpage Black Bethpage Black 101. The history, the myth, the architecture. So let's take that good walk that definitely can be spoiled out to Farmingdale, New York, and a little community called Bethpage near Bethpage State Park. So it is a quite interesting little community out there. So Bethpage State Park is out on Long Island. Depending on traffic, it can be anywhere from about an hour from the city to 3 hours from the city, especially if you're trying to drive out there on, say, a busy weekend morning when everybody else in the summer is trying to make their way to their Hamptons house and you don't have a helicopter. So Bethpage State Park is home to 5 courses, all named by their colors. They have the yellow course, the green course, the blue course, the red course, and the headlining black course, which is going to play host to the Ryder Cup. It opened in 1936 as a part of a WPA era vision to bring the world-class recreation to the public, and it was officially attributed to A.W. Tillinghast. Yes, the same mind behind Wingfoot West, Baltusrol, and several other Golden Age treasures, including Jumping Brook, which I had played out of as a member while I was still living in New York City, sort of just on the Jersey Shore coast. But A.W. Tillinghast definitely made his mark on several different courses throughout the East Coast. Again, noting that Bethpage Black is sort of one of those headliners, along with obviously Wingfoot and Baltusrol in the East Coast. Black was initially shaped in concert with the park superintendent at the time, Joseph H. Burbeck, who oversaw the construction and really left a real imprint on the property. One of the standouts about Bethpage Black is that it is a municipal golf course at championship scale. It is a walking-only brute for everyday golfers, and it is a proven tournament venue for the best in the world. I kind of mentioned this earlier in the episode, but kind of leaning into some of the other historical events that have been hosted there. Going backwards, the 2019 PGA Championship, it had FedEx Cup playoff events in both 2012 as well as 2016. And it also played host to the US Open in 2002 and 2009. I'll drop the sign in here, and I'm sure this is not the first time that you're seeing it, but the other famous part about this course, which as a municipal golf course is also known as the People's Country Club or the People's Club, and the Black course has similar to a ski warning. Basically, it says at the first tee with a nice sign in big bold letters as you walk down to the tee box, the Black course is an extremely difficult course, which we recommend only for highly skilled golfers. It's a warning and also a dare. And, it's funny. You'll see so many players and I've been able to play this course, but it really captures the course's personality because you can just feel the jitters on the first tee. Most of the times that I've been able to get out there and play, I've played as a last minute addition from a tee time drop at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, the night before, and then I managed to be a single playing with a couple other random people. Some of those people, other local New Yorkers that kind of have the same situation, or they've been able to make their way out many times. Other people, they've made their big jaunt out and they've waited years upon years to be able to play this course. And I've played it with locals sometimes, where you play whites or the more forward tees, and you also get up there with the people who have never played it before, near scratch golfers that are looking to take it on from the full-on back tees, and I've played it all the way from the back too, which stretches. I want to say Bethpage Black distance. The back tees go from about 7,500 yards, and whether they're going to even stretch that out for the back tees, it's 7,500-ish yards. But, when they play it for the Ryder Cup, they might even stretch it out to 78. they might even be able to stretch it out to 8,000 for all I know. But it's super exciting to be able to have played it and looked at it from some of those back tee positions, because it is just a very different game when, me with a 260, 270 drive off the tee as a low single digit handicap is trying to think of what it would be like to play that hole with an extra 80 yards off the tee when somebody's able to bang the ball out 330, 340 off the tee. Much different game than you have as an amateur. So architecturally, sorry, I digress there, but architecturally, what you're going to really want to watch as you're seeing the players play these big shouldered bunkers and diagonal great hazards is what they're kind of called. So he loved creating these choices where you could kind of carry longer for better angle into the green, or lay back, a little bit tougher approach, but maybe safe and you're not bringing the bunkers or other hazards into play. But, it really creates a decision-making factor, especially for people whose distances might sort of fall into the middle grade of a hazard that's going diagonal. And then you're starting to think about, okay, how's my accuracy off the tee working for me? And so, the fourth hole is one of those. It's got multiple split fairways essentially with these diagonal bunker plays going in, and it just climbs with bunkers and sand in front of you, where it's just a very intimidating look. That goes into my next one. A lot of elevated canted greens that demand, a lot of height into the green and a lot of spin. So you can't just bully this place. You actually have to fly to the right shelves with the different tiers in the greens. So knowing that course, which obviously these guys will have plenty of time to practice on the greens before getting in there, and probably have a good understanding of where those pins are going to be for specific days. However, especially for those longer hitters off the tee, they're going to get some advantageous wedge shots or higher loft irons into the greens on some of these longer holes, just because Bethpage Black does play very long. If you're coming in from the rough with such narrow fairways that Bethpage Black does have, but then also very significantly high rough. Just was seeing an interview with the green superintendent who basically said that on a daily basis, Bethpage Black will play with about 3 inches of rough. However, for the Ryder Cup, I don't know exactly how tall it's going to be. We'll see. I think once the media gets there those days prior and we start seeing some of the practice going on the Golf Channel, and you'll start to see probably 5-inch rough, 4 or 5-inch rough. And it's thick. On any given day when you play there as a member of the public, you can walk over the golf ball left and right. The other thing too is I've played it in the spring and I've played it in the fall. And, in the spring that fescue hasn't fully grown up, and some of those other areas just outside of the rough. So some of those big hitters that might be going for the bomb and gouge type of technique on certain days, if they end up in some of that tall fescue, that ball is probably gone, not findable. And even in some of that rough, obviously you've got the gallery there to help find some golf balls and some spotters, but it is going to be thick getting out of there, and being able to have the fairways hit and being able to get that loft and that spin, you're not going to get that out of that thick rough. So being on the fairways is going to be the right place to be, as well as being long off the tee. The other thing too is that this routing just grinds you into form. There's no soft opening. The course just asks questions from shot one, and it doesn't let up. And it honestly, as you are getting started, it's tough off of the first hole, like I was saying before, and it demands shots every step of the way. Even like the third hole, par 3, with that diagonal narrow tee shot, which Ryder Cup days, it's going to probably be playing 220s, 230s, but with a tight green and a short landing area. I want to say it's one of the tougher par 3s. Also in the PGA, sort of statistically speaking, for greens hit. But as you make your way through this course, it's going to be just a challenge every step of the way. And then, like I said before, some of these matches might not get to 17, so you might not see it as much. But even 16, the par three, and 17, both of those holes demanding 17, one of the hardest holes in professional golf and just golf in general globally. So it's been restored and toughened as well to make it even more challenging for that 2002 Open. So Reese Jones stepped in. He did some lengthening, improved some of the bunkers and some of the surroundings around the greens and some of those elevations, and just sharpened up the course all around. So for a Ryder Cup, the setups will be probably a little bit more birdie friendly than a US Open, but do not expect the setup to lose its teeth. You're definitely going to see some strategic mowing lines to favor some of the aggressive driving while keeping some of those pinch points and traditional Tillinghast diagonal hazards and bunkers in play, so that it's going to give some decision making to some of these players off the tee and favor some players other than others. Definitely going to be a fun watch. So let's head into our next segment and kind of walk through a few of these key holes that I've been starting to highlight. So the first hole is just really one of those pick a line over the corner. There is a little bit of an uphill. It's also a very big downhill tee shot, dogleg right, slightly perched green, also slightly tiered, but it is also going to be one of those holes that has big momentum of the crowd behind you. So for the US, winning that first hole, as I said earlier, could almost feel like a 2-hole win, taking you into that second hole, stepping onto that second tee box, giving you that momentum moving forward. The fourth hole, that par 5, about mid 500s, classic risk reward, fairway bunkers left, hungry bunkers short of the green, also sort of a split fairway in case some trouble comes up off that left bunker where you're not able to hit your second shot all the way up to the green. There's sort of a landing pad between two sets of bunkers. So if you want to take on the carry for a long ball, even push that second shot up to the green, or you can also leave it a little short of those bunkers, partially blind approach into that highly elevated green. Eighth hole, par 3, about 200 yards, demanding tee shot to a green, framed by sand. Alternate shot, this is a we planned it kind of hole. So knowing your player's preferred shot shape and yardage is going to be key here to make sure that Bradley sets it up for his players and not necessarily the Europeans. 12th hole, beastly par 4, off and into the wind, dogleg right that just punishes indecision. You'll see the nerves show up here on Sunday, singles day, just because also making sure that you have the right approaches. So moving to the 13th, the other par 5, long uphill, birdies on the table with 2 great shots. But if you miss the landing zones, you're going to be scrambling for par for sure. For the 4-ball, it's going to be some exciting play. Some big numbers could happen, but also some little numbers. Birdies, eagles, definitely going to be something to look out for on the 13th. As we step into the 15th, par 4, elevated green, one of the best vistas on the property, looking out around sort of that home stretch and back towards the clubhouse. Approach is super exciting. Expect roars to ripple across the park. Super fun as you sort of make the home stretch. I mentioned and then 18th. So if we see the 18th as we are coming home right into the clubhouse, I saw some pictures already of the bleachers. I mean, you're going to not see the clubhouse. Usually when you play, it's a great walk. You walk off that elevated tee box, sort of a dipping fairway, sidelined by a couple sets of bunkers on both sides of the fairway and the landing zones. But overall, a pretty short shot up. I remember the first time I played, it was a big tee shot ended up hitting, I wanted to say it was about 100, maybe even 90 yards into the green. Put it close, elevated, wedge shot into that green, birdie, walk off. But that was a exclamation point that brought me back playing golf and brought me back to Bethpage Black, because the rest of that day just ate me up. I think I shot 92 or something that day from the tips, and several lost balls in that tall rough, and just a really rough day altogether. But coming into 18, that birdie gave me a big win. Meanwhile, I also had shot, I can't remember if it was a 76 or a 78, but a big day where everything was going right, and tee shots were bombed, hitting fairways, everything was just working in my favor, and it was tees and greens and not too much trouble. But with that particular round, I remember coming into 18 as well, catching the lip of one of the bunkers just short on the front right, coming into that green, being fried egg, essentially having to really rip a wedge into that bunker to try to get that ball to just pop up, and it basically popped straight up, rolled back down into the belly of the bunker, and another shot up. I ended up taking a double to close that round up, and I think it was that I was on for a 76, and I ended up walking off with a 78 with a double on 18. But that was definitely a tough one, and I think you'll see in that home stretch at Bethpage Black some trials and tribulations, because that course, as I said before, has some teeth. So with some of the changes in match play, par is going to be relative. With just 2 par 5s with 4 and 13, some of those birdies are not going to be as prevalent as you typically see in match play, just because of some of those things I've talked about on some of these longer holes, uphill, tiered greens, really, really tough putting surfaces. I mean, Tillinghast, known for his protective greens, and when you also add in a very long course with challenging rough that also factors in, you're basically dealing with a recipe for disaster for some players. While the birdies might be more limited and pars might actually be those winning numbers, in some of these situations you're going to see some bogeys happening, especially chipping around the green, some of those tougher tiered greens where it could run away from you if you leave yourself in the wrong spot. So having with a par could feel like a win. You might see a lot of having going on through where it's just going to be a game of patience with this Ryder Cup. The driver is definitely going to be a weapon. And of course, it narrows at modern landing zones. The side that commits to lines and trusts their carry numbers will control matches, because there are going to be some fine lines with some of those hazards and bunkering and force carries and things like that are going to be factoring in. And so making sure that you have those right clubs picked out, or I'm sorry, having that driver in control is going to be helpful, and it can be a big advantage for big hitters off the tee. Short game is definitely going to come under pressure. Some of those runoffs, especially some of the deep sand and bunkering around a number of holes, are going to punish any of those tentative wedge play numbers, especially when you're dealing with elevated greens that factor in with numbers. If the winds pick up on any of these days, that can also definitely factor in. And then the other big one is going to be the psychology that we're going to be seeing the advantage and disadvantage for both sides. So I think the U.S. is going to definitely have that. New York is going to be loud, funny, unforgiving. I mean, we saw some of the humor that was going on at the Whistling Straits. It was a great crowd, you have to say. It was not a negative crowd, I'd say. There was definitely some teasing and some pushback and things like that. So I think you're going to have hopefully a playful, good, fair crowd that is good sportsmanship for this Ryder Cup. So there will definitely be some heckling, and I think for the Europeans, how they lean into that is going to be a big factor. And I think their preparedness and managing the crowd is going to be big. But, New York is an international crowd as well. So don't let the home US crowd necessarily get you thinking that there aren't going to be Europeans. Yeah, New York, East Coast, huge European fan base that's living there full time too. So easy to get to from Europe. I think they're going to show up in big crowds. So that'll have a factor in strokes gained that you're just not going to find on the stats sheet, and you're not going to hear being discussed quite the same way, but I think it's going to factor in. So as we kind of wrap up and head into the final sort of segments here, as far as the fan and travel guide, getting out there is going to be a little challenging from the city, but should be some tournament shuttles that are running. Should be able to Google and find some different transportation options that will keep you from having to drive out there without a rental car. If you don't have hotel and you don't have Airbnbs out there, those that know, it's going to be very challenging for you to find affordable options. In the city, you still might be able to find them just because New York has so many hotels and hosts so many big sporting events. But if you're trying to be out towards Long Island with a nice beach house, good luck with that. Those that know the Hamptons know that even in the summer, $1,000 a weekend is not a small chunk of change to be dropping for an Airbnb or a beach house out there. So, but trains should be able to take the Long Island Railroad out there, and there should be shuttles going from the train station to the course, making it a great train experience. It's been a couple of years since I've been living in New York. I actually am finally going back for work stuff the week leading up into this Ryder Cup, and unfortunately I can't extend it to attend. But those that have been to, say, Belmont Stakes on a Triple Crown potential weekend know that the Long Island Railroad and the New York train experience is one not to be missed, and almost exciting as the crowd's at the venue. So where to post up? Bleachers are going to be near the first tee for sort of that opening. Should be a good amphitheater around 15 for some of those sweeping views, and around 17 for some of that late match drama, and that first tee bleacher setup for those matches that are going to be coming up 18 as well. Autographs and close-up practice vibes. Getting out there on Tuesday and Wednesday is going to be your best bet. During the weekend, you're not going to get as much player access. That is actually one area that I'll be interested to see, is the practice area, which I had heard they actually are not using the traditional practice range that's out at Bethpage, but I believe that they're actually using potentially one of the other courses holes as an actual practice range. So, which makes sense because the range out there leaves a lot to be desired for the echelon of a course. But, if you are out there at Bethpage Black, don't forget to stop into the pro shop. I know that they're already starting with some Ryder Cup stuff that's available in the pro shop only. I believe that they're the only officially licensed, or like the official pro shop for the merchandise. And I do know that you can kind of call and get some access to some certain things, so you might want to try that. If you're not able to attend and want some merch, you can try giving the pro shop a call, and I would probably do that sooner than later before they get busy. Yeah, so there's all sorts of other bonus detours if you're gonna be in the city or staying in the city. You could always build in the Broadway shows, museum visits, or even see if there's a baseball game happening potentially. But world-class golf by day, world-class city by night. You got both of them right there. It's going to be a party. I really wish that I could have been there. I really wish that I still lived in the city just for this. And I do know that some friends have been lucky enough to be out there and getting in some of those last tee times for the public before they shut down for the Ryder Cup. And I heard it's just, in epic shape right now. So jealous of those folks. If you do make it to the pro shop, think of me. This hat definitely could use a little refresh. So I'd love some merch if you If you DM me, I'd love to get some. So, all right. So, wrapping up, this has been a big episode so far. I'm starting to lose my voice, but here is kind of what I've been looking out for. Early predictions. First tee body language is going to be key. Opening foursomes on the black or truth serum. Who's going to look comfortable as they're coming in to that first green, and who's feeling comfortable as they're walking up to that first tee. I think there's going to be a lot of jitters and there's going to be a lot of showmanship on that first tee for sure to try to get the hype going. But how long is that adrenaline going to last before the teeth of Bethpage Black come out? The U.S. driver deployment. And so does Keegan Bradley encourage green lights with the big stick, or is he going to try to push players to be a little bit more conservative on the tighter corridors of the course? So if the U.S. owns the tee and is able to go big or go home, I think they could own the week. And it really is going to kind of depend on some of the course setup too, I think, and some of those tees that might favor some of the U.S. big hitters. Or, if he does play certain holes for certain days to be more conducive for the conservative play, that could also get interesting as well. But don't discount the fact that there are some big hitters like Jon Rahm and Rory over on the European side too. So don't discount that. Europe's foursomes. So if Luke Donald's pairings keep the ball in position and apply steady pressure, I think they can absorb the crowd and steal a lot of that Friday momentum too. So again, looking at some of the data-driven decisions, and to my earlier point about using the halving of the holes to basically keep the European team patient. They play that game. They don't get out of their heads too much. Stay focused. Go drive for pars. Just keep that pressure on. Force those risk-reward mistakes of maybe the U.S. team going for birdies, and maintaining that patience and just understanding that a par is a win too, might be able to control some of the momentum and some of the amphitheater pressure from the U.S. side that could happen on Friday. So that could be something to look into. And then clutch putting. Greens are not necessarily tricked up, but they are firm and they are canted, and 10 footers to have holes can definitely decide some points, I think. And similarly, some of those approach shots coming into the greens, if you're not in the right place, they can be a penalty as well. That, a good shot in, leaving a good 10-foot birdie putt could be the big difference. So early lean, slight edge to the United States at home. I mean, I have to go for the U.S., of course. It's, my home team. So I'm thinking a 15-13 if they embrace the aggressive lines off the tee and keep the crowd energy channeled. Europe's path is going to be that foursomes precision and some of that big game shot making from the spine of McIlroy, Rahm, and Hovland, who have, kind of been here, done that before. But I am hoping for a close matchup. I'm not hoping for a big U.S. runaway. I do want a close Sunday where, that 18th hole starts to come into play, as well as, 17 and some of those big challenging holes that are going to be making some big numbers. So really hope that's going to happen. So before we wrap, that is our Ryder Cup preview, and also sort of my love letter to Bethpage Black. I can't say it more, it's the People's Club, and super excited to see what kind of a venue plays out the weekend of the Ryder Cup. It's going to be exciting. It's the People's Championship venue. It's going to have a raucous crowd. And if you're heading out to Farmingdale, shoot me a DM. I definitely would love some merch. And tag me in some pictures. I'd love to see sort of your behind the scenes. I'll reshare you at pony_golf. Hopefully you'll be grabbing a breakfast sandwich around the corner. Maybe you got onto that Rouse special Italian restaurant setup that they've got going on. One of the most exclusive Italian restaurants in New York City has a special pop-up at Bethpage Black. If you get in there, I'd love to see that too. I'm a huge foodie. Hopefully you're going to be able to catch some of those roars on Friday morning as they kick off. And if you are watching at home, tag me in your setups, and love to hear your hot takes. And looking forward to debriefing on it all in a post-cup sort of highlight episode, hopefully. And thank you all for listening to A Good Walk Spoiled, Adventures in Golf. Until next time, keep swinging, keep traveling. Remember, at Bethpage Black, that warning sign isn't there to scare you. It's there to invite you into the arena and that challenge. So yes, enjoy the roars of the Ryder Cup. And with that, good luck Team USA. And thank you all for your support of all of my sponsors. And go check them out. Follow me at Pony Golf. And when you are making your next purchases, I'd appreciate your support of brands like Red Rooster Golf, Galway Bay for rain gear, Red Rooster Golf, favorite standout golf glove. And then, make sure you're supporting some of those other companies like Vessel, Spy, Optics, and support some of my merch on millions.co. Thank you. Enjoy the Ryder Cup. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Tell your friends, subscribe, and tune in to future episodes. Have a great day, and we'll catch up on the course sometime. That concludes today's episode of A Good Walk Spoiled, Adventures in Golf, hosted by Scott Poniewaz. That's myself. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, rate it high, and follow us on Instagram at pony_golf to stay in the loop. Catch you next time.